Can skins make you play better on World of Tanks? I think we all know that answer, and that is definitely no, but considering how much you're going to have to pay for some of them, and including today's feature, which is one of the rarest tier 8 premiums, the Type 59G, and how much players have had to have bought this for on the black market, yeah, I would definitely want to be performing in it, and hopefully we're going to witness 2 replays, which are really good ones in both skin vehicles, this one being the rarest of the 2 and the second one being the Forest Spirit, and we can get into that later on in the video, but we're going to showcase this rare vehicle and of course what it can do in the right sort of matchup and everything about this tank. First off, let's talk about the speed, because it can push into an aggressive position really early in the game using its 60 km/h top speed, which we're seeing here. And that is exactly what you want from these aggressive medium tanks that have that brawling armor like we're seeing, and hopefully it's going to be a good showcase of that, and we can talk more about this tank in particular. Now you're seeing here a really good thing to do at the beginning of your games is to take down these walls right here. Now a HE round would have been perfect to knock down those walls, but you can see here he's pushed up and he gets easy side shots into the opponents that are pushing up through these area. The IS-6 Black, which is definitely one of the I don't know how to say power crept vehicles in World of Tanks, of course having the roof armor that is basically paper, and of course having terrible penetration. And on the premise of terrible penetration, the Type 59 has pretty bad standard pen, and of course when you do use the premium rounds it gets okay pen. It's nothing outrageous, which is kind of a balancing feature of this vehicle, having 241mm on those premium rounds, which are for the most part able to deal with most opponents that you come up against when you are using this, but at the same time it can feel a little bit annoying when you're coming up against more of those super heavy vehicles. I'm looking at the Malshan and stuff like that. The 241 pen just feels a little bit lackluster, but either way the Tiger 1 on the enemy team is trying to push and poke the Type 59G. Obviously not the best idea, especially considering this tank is going to be able to just punish the Tiger 1 quite easily, and with him tracking this Tiger 1 in place and keeping him locked down and essentially just rinsing him of all of those lovely juicy hit points that the Tiger 1 has, it just doesn't feel fair. And although the skin has no impact on that, the players that are typically going to be in these sorts of tanks, given the fact that you're going to have to pay a ton of money, usually have a little bit more experience or have played the game long enough such that they warrant spending, you know, tens or hundreds of pounds on just, you know, one vehicle like this Type 59G. I believe at the black market, the recent one, it was sold for 25,000 gold starting price, which is, yeah, I mean, very expensive for a tier 8 premium that for the most part is the exact same as the standard Type 59. It just has this weird gold kind of skin that of course looks pretty cool, but yeah, not particularly what I would be spending my real life money on. But either way, at the beginning of this game, pushing into this position, very good use of the knowledge of the game to get some easy shells of damage and not have to receive a single hit so far. But knowing that, now he pushes in towards the opponent's team. He shuts down the IS, who's going to be the main competitor at this point, or at least the one that's going to be able to shoot him, and then he tries to go for the tracking shot on the IS-6B. Unfortunately not able to actually connect one, but he goes for the tracking shot with the second one, and then it doesn't take off the tracks. Those APCL rounds coming in as a bit of a hindrance here. But either way, the Ferdinand on the team decides he's going in, and the Type 59 is like, well, okay, I'll trade your hit points, and he goes straight for that lower plate of the IS-6B, and he is quickly eradicated from the game. And in a quick succession, he goes for the tracking shot of the VZ-44-1, and he manages to pin him down, and using the brawling armor of the Type 59 he basically locks him in place here, and this is exactly what you want to be doing. And essentially not only are you getting actual damage but also assistance, although, you know, even though no real opponents were able to hit anyone that he tracked, it still gave himself assistance, if that makes sense, as he's able to plat multiple rounds into the opponents that are going to be here. But in this matchup, which isn't a perfect matchup because he is in a tier 9 game, you've got to be a little bit careful. And of course, if you don't want to be careful and you want to be a bit rash, then of course if you hit the subscribe button, you're going to be able to get away with some of those aggressive plays in your next game. But of course, apologies for the meme, but at the same time it does really help out the channel, and I much appreciate any of you who have decided so far to have subscribed, since we are getting towards 5k, and I thought this would be a nice little replay to showcase something a little bit different, and of course not just focusing on those top tier gameplays where someone just steamrolls through the opponents, but a little bit more of something else. But of course you can see here he's trying to focus the standard B, as this tank is a very dominant one at this sort of tier. If he's able to fully reload, he's going to be able to rinse a ton of your hit points away. And when you've got so many tanks in front of you that we're seeing here, that is kind of like a farming pinata here, the enemy team, he definitely doesn't want to be clipped out and avoid being able to farm up even more. Now, having done 5,000 damage, this is a good result for a tier 8 premium, and of course any tier 8, to be honest with you. And he meets himself up with kind of a similar counterpart in the T44-100, which has the 100mm and some side skirts on a T44, which is the tech tree version of the Soviet tank, and this is of course the premium one, the T44-100. But the key thing about playing in a tank like the Type 59 is that you need to keep the gun firing for this thing to really come out on top, and for the most part, if you don't manage to be aggressive in this tank, you usually don't end up getting as much damage as you're hoping for, since, you know, 250 alpha that the tank gets, and with the lackluster penetration when you're trying to snipe with this vehicle, it's not very rewarding. And unless of course you're trying to hit a light tank over ridgeline on the move and with flick. But of course the APCR rounds coming in here a little bit clutch, because they have the higher speed, the shell velocity to be able to launch an attack against some of these ones. But he manages to finish off the Panther, helps out his little TNH there, and it's just a few vehicles left trying to get into that cap circle, and it's been a perfect base defense here, maybe overcommitting at the beginning when he was trying to get some shots on that standard B, but he lowered the hit points of the standard B such that he can't just kind of come out into the open. But he does go for this UDES 14, who's going to be camping in their base still, because, you know, base campers are always fun when they're in World of Tanks. But he manages to land a successful shot, and now he's just going for as much damage as he can, having picked up over 6,000 damage in this one. And although this tank is, you know, not necessarily one of the best vehicles by far, the Type 59 has been kind of power crept by a lot of vehicles, and although it was overpowered when it was first taken out of the game and players were refunded, of course, with the standard Type 59, and then Wargaming release a gold Type 59 and then sell it for, you know, ridiculous and ludicrous prices that we're seeing in today's game, because, you know, a once unbalanced tank is now suddenly balanced, given the fact that we have all of the premiums that we do now in the BZ176. We all know about things that have kind of gone awry over the last few years with some of the premium tanks and the slow and encroaching power creep, and I'm sure some of these BZ176s are going to be power crept next year with some of the loot box tanks that we always seem to have over the years. But you can see here, nice little easy shell onto the UDES 14, of course the tier 8 Swedish tank that, you know, you've got to make sure to deal with, because that tank has an option of both a 320 alpha gun and also a 390 alpha gun from my memory, and of course that can pump a big old shell through you, and when you haven't got a whole lot of hit points left, you want to make sure that every single shot you're landing on him is going to take him out, because although the game and his team are up by 2 tanks, it could all change very quickly, and so you don't want to be getting caught out by any mistakes. And luckily he doesn't manage to get taken out by the UDES, even with the high roll that he managed to pull out, but he does manage to lock the UDES in place and just land a few successful hits really easily there. The TNH obviously trying to go on that long reload, and the UDES trying to get that last shell onto the Type 59G, but not quite able to. I think the Type 59G thought he had won the game there, but there is still one tank for you to take out, mister, and he goes straight after him. And it's always interesting to see this tank in action, because it is quite a rare one. We don't often see the high damage replays and players doing as well as we're seeing here in this tank, which is yeah, definitely one of the reasons why I wanted to show it. And of course with the skinned versions of tanks and stuff like that we see in World of Tanks, then yeah, it's always an interesting one to have in here. But hopefully I gave you an indication as to the Type 59G, but that's not it. Let's have a look at the Forest Spirit. And so what about the next vehicle in today's video? The Forest Spirit. Well, of course, this is the skinned version of the SU-130 PM that actually looks pretty cool in how they've actually done it within the game. But of course, this tank in itself is a very, very powerful vehicle, and in fact, given the fact that it's just took a fat steaming dump on the Scorpion G on the enemy team, it's actually potentially a better version of the Scorpion G, which in itself when it was first released was a very, very powerful vehicle. And of course the SU-130 PM being very closely linked to the Scorpion G, being that it is kind of the Soviet version of course, that vehicle and the tank destroyer at tier 8, and it is very, very similar in how it plays, the playstyle, that sort of thing. Of course, this one not getting anywhere near as good armor as the Scorpion G, at least, you know, on its upper plate, etc. This tank doesn't really bounce any rounds, and with the 1100 hit points, it doesn't have a whole lot. But the powerful thing about this, and the reason why you don't get that armor, is because of the fact that you do have the 520 alpha damage as opposed to the 490 of the Scorpion G. And with the 520 alpha, it means you can outtrade tier 10 heavy tanks if you do find them 1-for-1. And although this tank is going to get removed pretty quickly if you're doing that, it does give you the opportunity to really deal a ton of damage in tier 10 games, which is what we're seeing in today's replay in this thing. And it is once again a vehicle that is bottom tier in this replay. So once again, I've been keeping an eye on the comment section, and of course you guys wanting to see more of the kind of bottom tier replays where tanks still do well and they have to play very well, and that's what we're seeing here with this one. So make sure that if you have any questions or queries that you ask in the comment section, and I'm sure I will try my best to answer them, and if anyone else answers them, then that's a big bonus as well. But most importantly, having done 1200 damage so far, you'd be thinking, well, this tank has done okay. I mean, it's hit 2 shots, it's a little bit into the game, but with the power of the DPM of this vehicle, as well as the fact that you have the potential to derp a ton of rounds into a lot of opponents with very, very good penetration, given the fact that this tank actually has 240 pen on its standard and 320 on its heat rounds, and the fact that it even has heat rounds makes this thing very, very strong when you are coming up against those heavily armoured vehicles, things like the Mauschen, the Type 5s, the Type 4s, the you know, Mauses, etc. You can compete with these tier 10s, which means that at the end of the day, it's just really how well you play in these tier 10 matches that determines whether or not you're going to have a good game, because the tank itself is a good tank. It has everything that you need. And that's why I think this tank does so well in the game, is because, you know, it has a good combination of having the view range, decent concealment, it has a brilliant gun, and it has 65 kilometers an hour top speed limit, which means you can mobilize. And mobilizing in this tank is something that will change how you think about tank destroyers, and why I wanted to feature it in today's video, because this play right here that we've just been witnessing might not seem like a good play, or may seem like, you know, you're exposing yourself to a lot of vehicles that could take you out pretty easily. But in fact, this play right here won his team the game 100%, because he's now putting pressure on the Char Futur. He's going to put pressure on the enemies that are pushing the cap circle. He's going to allow his team to stay in that cap circle and force the opponent's hand to make those misplays. That's exactly what you want from a tank like this, as well as being able to spot people coming up from behind the 268 version 4 on his team and just put rounds into the Skoda T27. So it's been a very, very good round of World of Tanks, and that's what we're all about here on the channel, is to showcase some of the best replays. So if you like that, then make sure to subscribe once again. But more importantly, is in this game develops in a weird way in which, you know, he's having to be more and more forced to make the plays for his team to win the game, and he's not having to rely on those tier 10s in his game to come away with a win. Given the fact there's only one left in the game, being the FV 4005, he certainly needs to make up for the fact that the enemy team have 2 tier 10s left in that T62A, and of course the Jaegeru, who will feature in a little bit. But at this point, slightly badly aimed shot there. I'm not going to complain. I mean, in this sort of situation where you're trying to really connect everything, it was just kind of a bit of a snapshot there, and he doesn't manage to connect. So it doesn't matter all too much because he does shut down the T62A directly afterwards with the next shell. But, you know, it could potentially have been a better shot. You know, it's all in this kind of situation where, you know, under pressure you've got to make the shots, and sometimes it's very difficult to do it every single time, and you do make these mistakes. But we're not putting that on this player, because this player is actually very, very good in the SU-130PM or the Forest Spirit, and taking this position here allows both his team to be able to deal with anything that's going to be pushing the northern side of the map, as well as allow him to get some really easy shells onto the side of tanks like the Jaegeru or the Tortoise, who are pushing towards the cap. Now, the good thing about this spot is you might think, oh, well, they can just basically hit you every single time when you're in the position that he was in. But no, when he gets up to here, you can't really hit this tank when he pulls back behind the ridgeline that we're seeing here. There's kind of this kind of raised area of the hill which he's able to hide behind. And that is really what you want when you're playing in these tanks, is to poke out, deal your shot of damage and try and avoid the next shell. But noticing that the enemy tanks are going to be pushing quite hard towards his teammates in the cap, given the fact they're only 20 seconds away from capping, he decides to push towards where the enemy tanks are going to be. And oh look, a evil little Jaegeru sat in the center, and he's going to fully aim. Oh, a ricochet off the top of the roof of the Jaegeru really annoys him there. I would be super triggered at this point when you're just trying to win the game. And he goes for the second shot, and oh no, a little bit of a whiff. The Jaegeru goes forward just as he fires, and he misses. An absolute annoyance there, but hopefully he's able to connect this next shot. It's the easy side armor of the Jaegeru. He shuts him down, and with the help of the Scorpion G, he's out of the game pretty quickly. But here, this is a very clever play. We're going to see 2 really clever plays from here on out that are very, very good in the way in which he deals with the high pressure situation. You know, a 2 versus 2, both of them, well, both teammates being, or both sides being tier 8s. I don't know why I was faffing around there trying to get that one out, but one being a Progetto 46, who's going to be the biggest pain in the backside, literally, of the Scorpion G, as he's ploughing rounds into the back of him when he's trying to push towards the WZ, but he is going to have to make some plays here, and in doing so he's got to come up from behind the Progetto 46, but he knows that the Scorpion G is in a dire situation. He's pushed him way too far, there's not a lot he can do, and he's shut out of the game pretty quickly. But in moving forward and knowing that the Progetto is actually on the lower side of the kind of middle area of the map, he's going to move up into the center of the map, because that allows him to play out the game how he wants to. The Progetto's a one shot, he can take multiple shots from the Progetto. Even in the worst case scenario, he still moves up here, and that means he's going to be able to finish off the Progetto, at least hopefully. So he pushes over to here. This is the area in which the Progetto can actually come up, and oh look, surprise surprise, the Progetto's exactly there, and he shuts him down with that one shell easily, using that 530 alpha to maintain. Even if he low rolled to the min roll, he would have still finished that guy off. But there is still a WZ left alive, and he is on nearly full health, if not he is on full health, so he needs to be a little bit careful here, because it could go either way. You know, if he doesn't connect the first shell and the WZ hits him at the same time, he's going to be in the kind of the negative. But instead of kind of sitting up there and trying to get an easy shot, he just is proactive in this game. He pushes down, he comes down from this location, and this is the second kind of smart play after finishing off the Progetto, which is the more important target, since he could surprise him at any time. The autoloader is obviously very dangerous in the late game, but in doing it so, in pushing over here, I don't think the WZ is necessarily thinking that he's going to do this, and this is exactly the sort of play you want to be doing. You want to keep your opponents on edge at all times and not do anything necessarily 100% predictable, because I think the easy and most predictable way would be someone just pushes straight into the cap circle from the middle, trying to come from underneath. And luckily this player here does indeed actually come from the side, and that allows him to get the shell into the side of the WZ, which gives him that time to at least reload another one if he bounced or make the next play. And this is the really smart play here. He jukes the WZ so bad. He pretends like he's going to be moving down off of the hill to push around from the other direction, but instead relocates back up to the top of the hill. Where's the WZ going to be? Oh look, he's thinking that the Forest Spirit has gone in that exact area that we predicted he would expect him to go, and of course he comes up from the side and lands a really easy shell and finishes the game with 7,500 damage in a tier 10 game as well, may I like to add. So a brilliant replay here by Cuirass. So thank you very much for uploading it onto the What Replay site along with the first replay, and just thank you for watching this video. And if you want to see more, check out this video on screen and I'll see you there. Goodbye.